Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria QK.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Scott Peterson getting an ass whooping in prison, a track star that says she accidentally beat her competition with a baton, police finding a dead person randomly on top of a woman, penis enlargement, and burials at sea. Let's talk about this Scott Peterson situation. It's about time someone kicked his ass.
All right, so Scott Peterson, who was famously convicted of murdering his wife Lacey and their unborn child, he got attacked in prison over a pickleball debate.
The pickleball, like, you guys know how I feel about that. The hipster sport that just all of a sudden is popular within the last couple of years.
It's a classic "what's wrong with your generation" situation with
It
you
really
with the
is.
pickleball.
It annoys the shit out of me.
Even though the sport has been around, I think, over 100 years, but there has been a surge in the last decade. It's not like it just popped up last year like it did in your mind. It's been popular for the last couple years. But I guess it has hit the prison system, so he was playing pickleball against another inmate, and they're saying that he purposely, I don't know, this is alleged, that he purposely hit this ball at the other inmate, which pissed that guy off, and then he beat the shit out of him.
It's funny because when he got arrested and everything and throughout his trial, he always, it's hard to think of him killing his pregnant wife because he always seems like he's so, what's the word that I'm looking for? He has no emotions or something. He looks like that he's not an aggressive person at all, right? You never get that vibe. Like, he's so chill.
I don't know, but like
I think
that's how
he's like a
those-
little off, honestly.
That's how those people are, though. A lot of times that are murdering other people, they're like quiet, recluse people, and I
Yeah.
don't know.
I don't know. So yeah, it's interesting that he got pissed off and tried to hit someone and I guess that goes with our next story too, right? But yeah, so he got beat up in jail. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I know people are in prison and stuff, but it's just kind of like you're in prison the rest of your life. He was supposed to be killed by the death penalty, and that's not happening now. And you're just enjoying a day out in the sun in California with the mountains around you playing pickleball outside. It's just weird.
I mean, he's been in jail since what, roughly like 2004, maybe since he was arrested in 2003. And I'm really surprised he's lasted this long without. I mean, has he gotten any other big fights? Because usually when we hear of stories like this, other prisoners are really not okay with like sex offenders and child killers.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised he hasn't been in any other situations like this before. But I mean, the injuries he got from this pickleball fight were not really that bad. He didn't have to go to the hospital or anything. Like,
I think he needed a little ass whooping, though. I think it's it put a smile on everyone's face. You could see it on the internet. Like, nobody was just like appalled by it even a little bit. But
no, I think most people think it's funny and well deserved because he's a piece of shit.
so let's talk about this track star who also seemingly took her aggression out on someone.
So this video goes viral from this track meet, and it's kind of weird. I mean, I'm sure you watched it when you were writing up your notes for this, but they're like rounding the corner of this relay race, and it appears that one of the girls purposely takes her baton and hits the girl like coming up next to her that's slightly in front of her over the head. That girl ended up getting a concussion. They think she might have a skull fracture, and the chick that hit her is saying it was an accident.
I don't know. I'm not an expert in. I am an expert. I'm a life expert. Okay,
You are
like
an
that girl looked like she just was trying to give her a beat down and hurt her. Like, your arms don't go all the way back like that when you're not trying to hurt somebody. You could watch her arms the entire time. They're at this one position holding the baton, and then all of a sudden she gets close to this girl and just starts like putting her arm back and forth so hard with the baton and hitting the girl. I just don't understand how it was an accident. And furthermore, the chick hasn't apologized to the girl that got injured. And if you hit somebody by accident and they had to go to the hospital, wouldn't the normal reaction be for you to be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I feel terrible.
Yeah, I mean, she's arguing that she lost her balance and it was just kind of like a wrong place, wrong time situation. Like the other girl that got hit ended up cutting the corner at the same exact time she was trying to like
Yeah,
flail
and
and rebalance
she got
herself.
pissed. She got pissed. That's what happened.
So I think when you really look at the video, it is genuinely difficult to tell if it was intentional or not, but when you think of the lack of apology and everything else like that, you could easily argue that it was
I
intentional.
mean, yeah, like people are going online and saying really racist and mean things to her, and I don't think that's necessary. But
No.
also, it's just like, dude, you're putting yourself in this position because you're trying to tell all of us not to believe what we're looking at. I mean, anybody would say that she's given her a beatdown. And it's interesting because track and field is considered to be a relatively safe sport. I mean, you could get a ton of orthopedic injuries for sure, like Achilles tendonitis and muscle strain and things like that. But it's not common for people that do track and field to get traumatic brain injuries and concussions that may affect them later in life. And these people always carry batons, and this has never happened accidentally like this, you know?
I was just surprised the damage was so severe because these things, I know they're made from aluminum, but they're pretty light. Like they're only an ounce, but I guess when you add the force of a human behind it, that's where it could
You
be.
could punch someone in the head and break their skull, so it's just
Yeah.
especially having a piece of metal in your hand like that, it's totally possible. And it could have just fractured. I mean, when they say a skull fracture, there's over 20 bones in the skull. It could have been a simple, like a small little hairline fracture in one of the smaller bones within the skull. But regardless, like she had a concussion, she had a traumatic brain injury, and it's like you guys have to watch the video because there's, in my opinion, you don't really hear anybody saying that that they believe it's an accident, right? Besides her and her parents.
No, I mean, I think if you just watch the video, it's not super easy to tell, but the lack of remorse on the girl that did it kind of says it all for me. So, like, you can't, you exactly what you're saying. It's very unusual that if you would hurt somebody genuinely by accident, that you would not apologize to them at all for it if it really was an accident.
So this next story is very unusual. Why don't you? I would say
I
unusual.
it's so confusing in many ways. So police got a call to go to this mobile home park in Michigan, and when they get there, they find this woman who is very much alive, lying on her bed but underneath of a dead man.
I don't even understand how this happened. So, police said that it was obvious he was a victim of homicide, which means he had to be pretty beaten up if this was determined without any kind of an autopsy. Had several signs that he had blunt trauma. They didn't say what caused it. And this was in the head, the blunt trauma. And he was stabbed several times in the chest and neck. I don't understand. So she did it. She gets arrested for it. She was taken to the hospital for evaluation, obviously. But then she would have had to move his dead body on top of her body.
Well,
It's
I
just
was thinking
interesting.
I was thinking about the scenarios of this, like were they having sex and then she used it as an opportunity to kill him? Was she trying to prevent an assault? Was he abusive and like holding her down or something? They said there was a child in the home that was unharmed. Who called 911? Did she call the
Unharmed is a light statement, I think, because I'm pretty sure if you're a child living in a home where this stuff is
Well,
taking
I'm
place,
saying
you're
like
definitely harmed.
also not murdered or stabbed. But who called 911? Was it her? Was it the kid? Was it somebody else in the neighborhood? I just don't really understand how the police even got there.
I could see your point of being underneath of the victim like that, but unless she was laying down on the bed and had something very heavy, like a bookend that was made out of raw iron or something in her hand, and then in the other hand had a knife, and you know what I mean? Like it just seems unlikely that having a man that's usually bigger on top of you that you would be able to cause that damage when you're pinned down.
But can't you argue that he was on top of her and she was beating him, trying to get him off of her, and then maybe there was a knife or a sharp tool on the nightstand or something that she was able to grab?
Like a letter opener, and she just on the nightstand and
A
grabbed him and
a
stabbed him in the
letter
neck.
opener is
It's
pretty
Yeah,
far-fetched, but
it's totally possible. Anything we as we know from this show and the gross room, like anything in the world is possible.
oh
So,
my god.
yeah, it's also it's interesting though because if she was taken to a hospital for evaluation I'm thinking that they were like, this lady is kind of messed up. Like, she needs to get checked out to see what's going on with her. Her mental, like, why was she laying there with a dead person on top of her? Like, we don't know how long he was laying there. We don't know what the deal is. Of course,
I'm
there's no other information.
I'm thinking she I'm thinking he was on top of her when the attack occurred, and I don't know if he attacked her first or she used it as a tactic to attack him. But it would be dumb to do that because, like, having that heavy of a body on top of you, obviously she was trapped. So that wasn't really well thought out, but that's what I'm gonna go with.
Maybe.
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, you know the biggest story that broke this week was Gene Hackman and his wife's death. So we covered that in the gross room. It's about a 10 to 15-minute read. So we really go in way more detail than we went in the short amount of time we have here on Mother Knows Death. Just going through all the autopsy findings and seeing like what would that look like if you were doing an autopsy and looking for this and what kind of tests were sent out and things like that. So that's super interesting. As promised last week, we're working on Ruby Frank, which is so disturbing. You see that there's so many of these family influencers online, and my kids would always say, you know, oh, like they get to play with toys all day and they're making money and all this stuff. And I'm just like, I don't think that their life is great because we know, Maria and I know that we do this and having to get up and do that on a schedule is a lot for an adult sometimes. And think about trying to make a kid do that. And this is a lot of behind the scenes of like showing how the kids really weren't into it. And the mom was getting increasingly frustrated because the kids weren't going along with how she wanted to make money off of them.
Yes, you guys are going to want to head over to thegrossroom.com to check that out. We're going to have part 1 up on March 17th.
Okay, so of course, this episode we need to talk about penis enlargement.
So in Russia, this 56-year-old man had a penis enlargement procedure involving hyaluronic acid injections. Shortly after, he experienced difficulties breathing, nausea, weakness, and tremors before eventually dying.
So we talked about this on previous episodes that men are getting hyaluronic acid is fillers that you hear about people getting in their lips and their cheeks, and we talked about that men were starting to get them to make their penis bigger. And in this case, I guess he had it done by a professional that wasn't quite a professional and didn't exactly know where to inject because there is a large vein in the penis. And when they did the autopsy on this person, they saw that the filler was in the head of the penis, and here it had went into this vein and ended up traveling into his lung and killing him. So that's called an embolus. So this would be a hyaluronic acid embolus when it traveled. And under the microscope, they were able to prove that that was what his cause of death was because they saw this foreign jelly-like substance inside of the lungs. And they also did this special test called a spectrograph analysis, which looked at the foreign substance and identified it as being hyaluronic acid. So they were able to prove that that's what killed him. And that's just something as simple as having an amateur injector. I mean, people get this all the time and don't have these problems, but you have to understand the same thing can happen with your face when you have a person that's not a professional or doesn't understand anatomy sticking a needle into your face. You could have a lot of problems that can be permanent, could even cause death.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting too because they're saying in this article that generally medical professionals will advise against getting any of these well, not any of these procedures, but this specific procedure done unless you had a condition like a micropenis, but I feel like we are often talking about men getting these done and it's not uncommon.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and it goes to our next story, which is research that's being done to really improve patients that have erectile dysfunction and for having erections. So it's interesting that the research that they're doing on this right now.
Yeah, a team of scientists in the US, China, and Japan have successfully 3D printed a penis implant, which they're saying could restore erectile function to rabbits and pigs right now, but eventually they're hoping for humans.
This story is so weird because first let's talk about the penis as an organ. It has a very complex vascular system. Blood comes into the penis from arteries and then it goes into the penis, fills up this spongy tissue that's called the corpus cavernosum. And that is what fills up with blood to make an erection. And then once the erection is done, that blood is supposed to leave the penis via the veins that we were just talking about with the other story and go back to the heart to get more oxygen. So that's what is called erectile dysfunction. And that can occur anywhere along the way. It could be a problem with the erectile tissue, a problem with the artery, probably with the veins, problems all the way up with the heart. There's just a lot of different things that could cause it. So these researchers took a pig penis so this is what I think is interesting. Pigs that have erectile dysfunction. I don't even know how you find them, how they have it. Did they give it to them? What happened? How do you have pigs with erectile dysfunction? I don't know. But these researchers, they made a 3D printing with a hydrogel base, which is scaffolding that was enough, it was strong enough to hold the internal pressure to fill up with blood to cause an erection. And they made this 3D printed penis essentially or erectile tissue. And then they lined it with endothelial cells, and endothelial cells are the cells that line the blood vessels. And that combination of them showed that their erectile dysfunction went away. But even more importantly, all of the pigs were able to breed later, and they got all of the pigs pregnant. There was no problems with fertility after this. So the study is super successful in their opinion, at least this small study they've done. And obviously, it's not done to help erectile dysfunction in pigs. It's done to help humans. But it's also hopeful for other vascular issues in other organs like the heart too. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, it is super cool. I think this is a thing we bring up all the time. Like, glad there's all these studies done for the penis and not a lot of women's health issues. But I mean, it is cool, especially if it could boost fertility and stuff. But I guess they're gonna have to what's next? Moving forward to human trials after they
I
prove
don't know
this is
if it. I
successful.
don't even know if they're really at that point yet because you can't. Oftentimes, you can't just do one study and be like, okay, it works. You know, they
Yeah,
might try a more complex animal or something. They might try a human. Who knows? Like other things, like someone might volunteer for this. I don't know because if you think about it, like if you already have a penis that completely doesn't work anyway, and this won't risk your life, like why not try it at that point?
yeah. I mean, are they gonna face because the anatomy of like a penis of a pig is so different from a human? I mean, will they face challenges with that?
Possibly, but all of the pieces are there, the same pieces. So obviously, like animals are different and they're not 100%, and that's why we always see things, with the kidney transplants and everything else. Like it always isn't 100%, but it's the closest thing. So they still have a lot of figuring out to do. But a penis implant right now is just kind of like it's just bulky and weird, and they have to put these cylinders into the corpus cavernosum, which are these empty, they almost look like exactly like those really thick crayons.
Yeah,
The thick ones,
yeah.
they're like that. They're like these cylindrical tubes that are empty, they're silicone, and they fill up with saline, and you have this pump to put the saline in when you want to get an erection. That's usually either it's in the scrotal sac or it's like right in their pelvis right there, that it's a pump that you fill up with to have an erection, and then you let it go to make your erection go away. It's a very invasive surgery. It causes scarring, which can then lead to other problems, and it's just awkward to not be able to get an erection without pushing like this little ball open to make the saline go in. So it would be a life-changing thing for men. There's a lot of men that have erectile dysfunction problems, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Alright.
So okay, this is I'm like really excited about this story actually because I kind of just never thought about this, and then after reading about it and looking into it, I feel like you guys will be really interested in it.
Well, at first we were going to report on this a couple days ago because these fishermen had caught a dead body in their net. So of course you're like, well, how did it get there? Is it somebody that was murdered? No, it turns out it was a woman buried at sea.
So in that situation, when they pull a dead body out of the water, they will take it to a medical exam. I don't even know who would do it. I guess it would be the jurisdiction of whatever waters they're in. I don't know if you're in the middle. Where were they?
In Massachusetts.
Okay, so they would probably bring it to shore to whatever county that's considered and do an autopsy, And from that autopsy, they were able to determine that number one, she was embalmed, and number two, she was around 60 years old. Number three, that she had cancer all over her body. So with those facts, they were like, and the way she was presented, wasn't she wrapped in a shroud or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Those facts, they were like, okay, this is a woman that was buried at sea. That's how they determined that. Well, they said more than likely she was buried at sea because you're just not embalmed for any reason and wrapped up like that and put in the water. So that's when I started looking into that because I don't know, I guess I just always assumed when people were buried at sea that they were throwing their ashes in the water.
Yeah.
Did you know they were actually throwing intact bodies in the water?
I know that some cultures do it. So like that wasn't the part of the story that shocked me. I was more surprised that this doesn't happen more often.
Well, that's what I was saying because I'm like, this is the first I'm hearing of this, and you would think that it would happen more often with whole bodies. I just never thought about it.
Yeah, I guess especially in the United States, it seems weird because I don't know specific cultures that do it off of the top of my head, so I don't want to just throw anything out there. But I know that some cultures do this burial practice. But yeah, I am surprised because I feel like when bodies normally turn up, it's not something straightforward like this person was buried at sea and you're saying they had all the telltale signs of that. And then we started looking it up and it's like it seems like it's pretty easy to do and you just have to notify the EPA within 30 days following the event. I mean, do you have to get this? I know they issued a permit, but do you have to get the permit beforehand? I would assume so, right?
I I don't know. I was under the assumption that somebody had to get the permit. Like I would think that maybe there would be funeral homes that had to have this permit and then underneath that as long as the person had the permit to do it, then they were able to do it. I don't know if like an individual can just go do this and throw a body off their boat. But I don't know. That's just kind of
I feel like you're facing many potential problems with that.
yeah, so it's probably more like it's the same thing. Like you're not allowed to just like take a dead body and bury it in the ground. Like you have to go through a funeral home and permits and all that stuff. So there are so you don't have to be embalmed. You could be cremated, embalmed, non-embalmed, whatever. There are some rules, and this is from like a governmental website. So these are the official rules that you're not allowed to do it if the remains are placed in ocean waters within 3 nautical miles from shore. You're not allowed to place non-human remains such as pets. And I think I understand why they might not want to do that just because of illnesses that they may have that they may think could be transmitted to the animals in the ocean. Not sure, just that's just like a wild assumption there. Um and they want you to make sure that you're using materials that are readily decomposable in a marine environment. But at the same time, they say that if you are putting someone in that you should like put weight on them like a steel chain to pull them down, which I'm like, well, that doesn't really break down in the ocean either, right? So I don't know.
I don't know, because then I would assume, like in this woman's case, you're going in with a wrap or some type of other thing wrapping your body, but then there's all these suggestions for what to do with a casket. So people are putting whole caskets in there.
Yeah, they were saying that US Navy members who get buried at sea have a metal casket, but there's all these rules for how they need to be. I guess the bigger question or like that I've never thought of is that in theory, if bodies are getting thrown into the ocean and there's animals scavenging on them, are are we potentially eating those animals? I mean, think about that. I don't know. I know that there's certain kind of fish that would eat off of a dead body, and I'm not sure if they're ones that we would typically eat. Um, and I'm not really sure about ocean animals like that much to say which ones are which. They did mention because there was some questions about what if someone wanted to get buried in a river of water or a lake or something like that, and there's all just different rules for different things. Most of them have to do with how deep the water is.
There's also some different rules with where you're doing it in the United States. So they're saying generally it has to be 3 nautical miles from land and the ocean water is at least 600 feet deep. But then they're saying in certain areas, specifically East Central Florida, west of Pensacola, Florida to the Mississippi River Delta, they have to be in at least 1,800 feet deep water. So I
That
wonder.
probably has to do with, like, the hurricanes and the stirring up of the water and how likely it is that it's going to wash ashore. I guess they're more worried about I really am kinda mind blown, like, by this. I can't believe that they're not washed ashore more frequently. Also, one interesting thing to me too is that they said that they might not ever find out who the person is, and I'm kind of like, "Why? There's not some kind of logs of who is getting thrown in the water?"
Well, that's what I was saying earlier with they're saying you have to alert the EPA within 30 days following the burial. So are you
Like, how
getting
many
the
people got buried in the water within the past 30 days?
Yeah, so are you getting the permit beforehand and then you have to submit the details of it after? I would like to know. I'm sure somebody listening knows exactly how this process works, but I am so fascinated that this happens in the United States and it seems like it's pretty easy and manageable to do. So,
It is kind of scary, like, scary. You think about being buried underground, some people are a little freaked out about that. I mean, I feel like being buried in the water is also terrible. Obviously, you're gonna decompose and break down faster in the water, but just the thought of being deep in the ocean by yourself is very scary too.
all right, let's move on to questions of the day. Every Friday at the at Mother Knows Death Instagram account, you guys can head over to our story and ask us whatever questions you want. First, for organ donors, is there an age restriction? What makes you not suddenly ineligible?
So, no, there's not an age restriction. Think about this. Sometimes there's babies that are born that need a heart transplant or need a liver transplant. And obviously, you can't take the heart or a liver from a 25-year-old who dies in a car accident. So, there has to be organ donors from every age range, unfortunately. Um, and as far as not being eligible, there's definitely things that would make a person ineligible. Certain infections like TB, viral meningitis, CJD, things like that. They don't want to transplant those organs. Sometimes when you are donating an organ, they will send a piece of it down to the lab and do a biopsy to make sure that the tissue is healthy. So if the tissue doesn't look healthy, either by disease process or if the person has active cancer, that would also be a reason for them not to want to transplant an organ. But there are situations like HIV and stuff that you would think, oh no, you wouldn't want to donate that organ or you wouldn't want to transplant that organ, but they've done it. And if you think about this, like if you're on the list and you need to get a new liver, you are going to die if you don't get that liver and soon. So you might take a liver that might not be the greatest thing in the world. It might be a person that had something like that, but it will give you time. And right now you don't have time. So it's kind of like a desperation thing because there's so many people that are on the list and there's just not enough organs for all those people. And so many people die every day that are on the list that are waiting. So um they are they just don't want to give a person way more problems than they potentially would get with a healthier one. So, um, but yeah, I mean, if kids, I mean, unfortunately, car accidents are like the biggest things for donors and healthy people who are dying, child, anything like that. I mean, it's so sad, but really, it helps other kids that are living that need it.
All right, second, does cancer keep growing when a person dies or does it stop when the person dies?
No, cells need oxygen in order to be alive and to reproduce. So, no. Or replicate. No, they don't. It dies when, just like your whole body dies. There's even this rumor that goes around that your hair and your nails grow when you die, and that's not true either. It's just that your tissues lose water and it shrinks down, so it appears like your hair is getting longer and your nails are getting longer, but they're really not. Everything stops.
All right, last, where can I find the coffee table book? Like our book.
Oh, my, like
Yeah,
Nicole
like
and
Nicole.
Jemmy's
Yeah.
Anatomy. You can find it at Barnes and Noble. They have it. They have it on Amazon. You could go to our website and order it.
Yeah, so on our website, it's thedoramater.com/book. We lead you to anywhere that sells it. So we have a link for international orders, UK, several retailers in the US. And then you could also order a book plate sticker. So you will sign that sticker, we'll mail it out, and then you could put it in your book.
Yeah, and there's a little spot on the website where you could fill out exactly what you want me to write. I have never turned anybody down for their requests, so don't ask for anything too outrageous, but yeah, and it's fun. Some people write really fun messages to people, so it's cool.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. Please leave us a 5-star written review on Apple, and don't forget to submit your stories to stories@motherknowsdeath.com or our Instagram account.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.